Hey Chooms! After a long hiatus, Welcome to Night City is back, as I've been trying to discover every single secret to 2077 there is. Well, after 8 playthroughs, I finally picked up the Cyberpunk Red book and gave it a more thorough read. The 12-hour power outage from Nicholas certainly helped encourage me. Is it better than 2020? Yes. Is it worse than 2020? Also yes. I'm Mr. Welch, and it was the best of Cyberpunk, and it was the worst of Cyberpunk. This is Cyberpunk Red. It is hard for me to review a copy of a book that is obviously, hopefully, going to be a game line. Any complaint I make might be completely invalidated by a future release that removes the problem. All I'm looking at is the core book of Red. If a future book addresses one of the problems I pointed out, so much the better. Everybody remember that when you watch this video a year later. Red is a direct continuation of the 2020 storyline, set 25 years after Morgan Blackhand, Johnny Silverhand, and your old PCs nuked Arasaka Tower. The game completely ignores 3rd edition as well as Cyber Generation, except for a slight shout-out, keeping with the hard science approach. It is very much a Pond Smith production, as not only does Mike appear as the writer, but Lisa and Cody also appear in the production. There's numerous other writers credited, with the cover art done by Anselm Zelonka. I butchered that. Interior art has several dozen credits, with more Polish names than I can safely pronounce. CD Projekt Red helped produce the book, which is quite obvious with several credits throughout. First and foremost, you're going to notice the game repeats a lot of fluff from the original. Pages of repetition, starting off with Never Fade Away, and a lot of the setting history also cut and paste from previous books. It is hefty at 456 pages. The repeated pages aren't that many, so it's more filler than padding. All the art is original and in full color, a first for a Cyberpunk core book. You are definitely getting what you paid for. Mechanically, the game is adopted from the 2020 rules rather than a complete retooling. All 10 stats are back, all 10 roles are available, with MedTech finally becoming an official role rather than the offshoot of Techie that fooled no one back in 2020. There's a couple of name changes with the Corp and the Cop, but those are purely cosmetic. Humanity is very much a thing, with cybernetics eating your soul if you want to Borg out. One major change is health is now a derived stat rather than multiple health levels. Life paths are radically changed, which gives you more contacts and history, but there's no chance of gaining stat bonuses or penalties like in previous versions. You're also heavily restricted on what you can start with depending on your character role, though this can be hand-waved. The game has a focus on balance, with hard caps on all starting stat and skill levels. No more beginning solos with maxed out reflexes and rifle skill proceeding to wreck campaigns before they even start. Beginning skills are quite generous, with everyone getting the same amount rather than 40 plus a derived bonus that was 2020. A lot of skills are combined or removed for having little actual use, as well as skill multipliers past times 2. But to be honest, they were obscure in the first place and you'll never miss them. Instead of 42 to 60 points, everybody starts out with a base 86 points, though a small amount is spent for you on basic skills. That was a bit annoying. Instead of telling us what we have to spend points on, just tell us what skills we start with and remove those from the overall points. If you get 90 points to start with, but you have to spend 5 points automatically in character creation on Winona Ryder trivia, you have 85 points in Winona Ryder trivia. It's a pet peeve of mine, and this is a rare game design choice, but it always bugs me. Major complaint is that the game, for whatever reason, is strangely generic. Instead of a long list of weapons, it's just a single stat line for every weapon in that class. The Militech Assault Rifle is identical to the Arasaka Assault Rifle and is identical to an antique AK-47. Cybernetic weapons are the same. There's different categories of cyber weapons, with no real details at all. Having played Merc campaigns of Cyberpunk and knowing the kind of people that love 2020, generic weapons are not what people want. They want gun porn. They want to describe in loving and obsessive details exactly what their weapon is going to do to the target when they pull that trigger. Even back when there was hundreds of different guns in 2020, they were all different. Going line by line over every single pistol to get the one that fits your character perfectly was part of the game. This can change with a single gear book, but it's still stuck out as lazy in the design. Every cyber weapon in 2020 was original. The mechanics of popping wolvers was radically different from having a chainsaw erupt from the middle of your forearm. And let's not forget the strange perversity that was the cyber snake. Netrunning also got a much needed overhaul, and this was something that everybody knew was coming. Gone was the day of everybody running to the fridge when Eric Jacks entered the Corp's data fort to steal the access codes to the bathroom because the Nomad forgot to go before you started the run. Now, due to changes in how the net works in-game, the runners have to accompany the party, and thanks to advances in technology, don't automatically go limp when you log into the net. More importantly, net runners have to alternate their turns with other players. Runners get a certain number of net actions based on their interface skill. Another major change from 2020 is that characters have abilities based on their roles. Originally, a solo and a techie had no real difference other than their one special skill. A solo couldn't jury-rig, but could do normal repairs just as well as a techie could, while a combat tech could shoot as well as the solo, just not as fast. Now the special abilities give you unique advances at certain levels. Some roles get a new focus, like nomads and cars, or execs getting defined corporate perks instead of random roles for undefined resources. It allows the characters to define themselves, as many of the abilities allow focusing on different aspects of their role. Combat is greatly simplified, which, like Netrunning, was not a surprise. Now you get one move and one action, rather than infinite actions and increasingly negative modifiers. No more running up to people with a shotgun at point blank and proceeding to unload because you get 3 shots off before you actually took a penalty because of the point blank bonus. Automatic fire is also changed by making multiple shots less lethal normally, but it's also tied to the skill auto fire, which gives you a multiplier for beating the target roll. Damage by automatic weapons is reduced to a flat 2d6, but if you roll well enough, you'll actually acquire multiple modifiers and can go higher than your normal damage roll if you succeed. Damage is simultaneously more and less dangerous. Gone are the 8 points of damage to remove a limb or 4 points of damage to decapitate someone. But on the other hand, you have fewer wounds to start with, so it doesn't take a lot of damage to die. Armor is ablative, which is a minor change. Every time armor stops a hit, the stopping power goes down by 1. In replace of the limb damage or the head decapitation rule after 8 points of damage, it adds critical hits. If you roll at least 2 6s for damage from an attack and at least 1 point gets through, you roll on the chart. Hit locations are gone, but you can still aim for the head or legs at a substantial penalty. One noticeable strength of the game is the fact that they copied the style of Night City Sourcebook and put reference tabs all throughout the book. If something mentions another rule, there's going to be a page number sending you to that location, so you don't have to hunt and peck for the right information. There's a lot of callbacks to older books in the form of fake ads, an Easter egg for 2020 players. It might be considered padding, but they are cleverly inserted and placed mainly as page breaks between sections, or in fluff parts to give you a feel for the world. About half the book is rules, but a lot of those pages are taken up by charts, so that number is a bit inflated. The history section is largely taken word for word from the 2020 source book, at least until they catch you up on the Fourth Corporate War. The name Red comes from the Night City sky after the detonation of the Arasaka nuke in 2023, which destroys downtown and kills 750,000 people. That's a retcon from 2020 because the nukes then were suitcase bombs designed to just drop the tower straight down. Now they were much more powerful. During this time, Raish Bartmoss also nukes the internet, causing it to become much more localized and far less efficient. The game is now set in 2045, as I've mentioned, and the world is rebuilding from the devastating Fourth Corporate War. Night City has been rebuilt from the ground up, so ignore your copy of Night City because it looks nothing like it did. Many of the old megacorps are supposedly gone, but the list of current megacorps doesn't seem to have changed much. There is a comprehensive look at the current megacorps, but they're mostly older ones and some new ones sprinkled in. And I'm not sure how a 2-person detective agency qualifies as a megacorp, but one of the 2 characters apparently is Saburo Arasaka's cat-eared granddaughter, who is a private eye and also somebody's waifu from the looks of it. I can smell a fetish insert character from a mile away. Night City obviously got a major workover. Most of the old neighborhoods are gone. The Corp Center and surrounding areas are now twisted wreckage that's only slightly radioactive in the best places. The population tends to live on the outskirts, with large chunks of the city being bulldozed into the ocean to make more room and to remove sections destroyed in the war. You can see the start of Night City as it's going to look in 2077, but for right now it's very much under construction. There's a small section on who's who and what's what in Night City, but it's a bit rudimentary and it looks like a preface for a much larger source book. There is a large section on current day culture. Oddly enough, there are comprehensive rules for cell phones, one of the few things Artal didn't predict properly in the 2020 source book. But since Bartmoss fragged the net, they're more restricted now, though they do have the ability to support a limited AI called an agent that can serve as a future version of Siri or Alexa. It's still similar to the 2020 setting, only much more desperate. You are playing in the ruins of a war zone after all. Because of all the rebuilding, things are scarce now. The supply chain is currently in tatters, so players have to look hard or get creative to acquire new things. Fixers are a mainstay of life even for non-edge runners. There's even a rule that items over a certain rarity can't be acquired without the help of a fixer. Of course, execs have their own supply chain, and there is the time-honored method of finding someone who has the thing that you like and shoot them. There are some game changes for balance to a lot of weapons. Mono weapons are no longer the instant kill marvels they used to be. Heavy armor will ignore their armor penetration, while lighter armor is ignored. Speaking of which, armor is now much more restrictive. No more creating blue jeans that can shrug off rifle rounds. Now you will suffer penalties to several stats for looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Cyberpunk is back, and it is pretty. And right now it's rather bare bones with all the generic descriptions. It did fix a huge number of issues 2020 had, you can't deny that. Netrunning is better, combat is mostly improved, and roles have a much more defined purpose. Stats are forced to start lower, but that's balanced by the addition of being able to raise your abilities scores, finally. This game is going to live or die based on its supplements. The art is top-notch, the book is well put together, and there aren't as many typos as you would normally find in an Artal-Saurian product. What it needs to put it over the top and completely bring back the 2020 charm is the stuff that attracted us back in the 90s. Gun porn, morally complex missions, a background you can get lost in, books that make for good fiction just as much as they had good crunch. Is that going to happen? God, I hope so. I can only play 2077 for so long. I want to feel the elation of picking up the latest book and see what new toys I get to annoy Arasaka with. That concludes the Welcome to Night City channel, at least until the next book gets released. Until then, stay safe, Chumbatas.